Hello, healthy people, and welcome back to the Organelle podcast. As always, my name is Xaviour Greenhalgh, and I am joined by the lovely, the phenomenal, the absolutely uncontested champion of health, none other than Organelle's leading practitioner, Mr. Lionel Godwin. How are you today, Lionel?
Xavier, as always, I'm overwhelmed by your enthusiasm and your description of me, but excited to be here again. Really loving the fact that we can get out and talk to people about health and wellness. That's really what Organelle is about. We're a business that is entirely focused on helping people manage, understand, and prosecute their own health and wellness. So, really excited to be back for another podcast.
Oh, I'm glad you're excited because the sky is the limit today. We're capping off the first three episodes of our podcast here with the big one. We've gone over in the past what is organelle, why does it exist. Then we've defined more specifically what health is and how we improve that. Now we're going on to the future. We're going on to the future of health. And so I'm going to start off. This is going to be a very broad conversation. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with. I'm going to start off by getting a simple question to you, Lionel.
Yes.
Right now, you're a practitioner for Organelle. That means you sit behind a webcam, you use our industry grade, state of the art, revolutionary portal to give people health advice as efficiently as possible and help change their lives. How do you see your job changing over the next 5 years?
That is a really, really, really interesting question. I see my job, particularly through Organelle and the Organelle platform, as being a job centered around empowering people to own their health and wellness journey, but more importantly, to demand more of those who they engage in helping manage and prosecute their own health and wellness journey. So, for me, platforms like the digital health platform that we've developed here at Organelle, I think will become more and more advantageous for practitioners. I think more and more practitioners will move to a telehealth system. I also think the expectation of our clients, i.e., patients, will increase exponentially. I honestly do believe that as society is changing, as we access more artificial intelligence, as we get access to more information, that clients will demand much more of their health and wellness practitioners, which I think is really important. Understanding that here at Organelle, we don't give medical advice, but what we do is give people access to information that will help them better seek medical advice and get better determinations from the medical advice that they will be getting, armed with the information that we provide through our digital health platform. And for me, that's where I think the future is heading. To reiterate, far more expected of the medical fraternity by clients, far more ownership of individuals around their health and wellness, far greater usage of artificial intelligence, and greater use of platforms like ours, where we are empowering people's knowledge and understanding of their health situation, which then empowers them to own the journey and seek better consultations from those that are giving them medical advice, which we aren't giving them. We're just arming them with the information. We're not giving them their medical advice, but we're giving them all of the advice that they need to move forward in a medical sense.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take on it because you're best of both worlds. You're not just saying that, hey, we're going to get more out of our professionals because of all the efficiency boosts of automation and artificial technology, but you're also going to put a lot more emphasis on the individual to take responsibility and gain a certain understanding around their own health to drive that journey that's just supported by the professionals.
100%. I think people now, more than ever in my 40 years in the industry, are much more aware of the control that they have, the capacity to prevent or predict. And I think that's going to be the massive change. Rather than using the old system where we're dealing with symptoms and we're responding to those symptoms with medications and or advice, I think people will be demanding much more. because of the fact that they understand now that they can play a far greater role in how they age, how well they are, what they're able to contribute to with respect to dealing with any ailments or illnesses that they might come across. And I think there is a determination by a lot to own their journey and not to be just reactive or seeking advice once they've got symptoms. Prevention, I think, is a major step forward for people. A lot of people now realise that to be caught in the mainstream health system is not necessarily a great place to be. As we've spoken about in previous podcasts, it's an industry that's under enormous pressure. So we're not getting the level of care that we should. And again, I'm not trying to denigrate doctors, nurses, or people within the industry. I am not. They are wonderful, wonderful people who have vast experience and great commitment to their roles. They are just overwhelmed by the sheer numbers. We at Organelle will be allowing people to stay out of that system for longer.
I see. So the shift that we're going to see towards a more proactive approach to health, a more preventative minded individual, is going to reduce the load, the kind of stress that we're putting on those facilities that are built right now as the health system, that are focused more on fixing what's broken as opposed to preventing those breaks from happening in the first place. That's what you're
Yeah.
saying?
We want people to stay out of the system. We want people to stay out of the system by virtue of understanding exactly where their bodies are at the moment through our biomarker testing that we do. We want people to understand just why they might not necessarily need to go and seek medical advice if they have an understanding of why they're feeling like they're feeling, or why their body is reacting or sending signals that it may be reacting to, or sending signals that it may be sending. With that understanding, they can then make a much more informed choice about whether they need to seek medical intervention, or whether there's some things that they can try with the knowledge that they're gaining via our digital health platform to go, okay, all right, I don't need to get in the system. I can try this using my biomarker testing, my blood testing and pathology tests, and I can ascertain for myself whether I need to seek more professional advice or other advice to deal with what might be going on. So it's about having that capacity to at least manage and understand your health and well-being via portals like ours. And for me, most people are reluctant to go to a doctor anyway. We actually want to encourage people not to necessarily not go to a doctor, but to have a much greater understanding of their own health and wellness profile through our biomarker and pathology works that we do.
Oh, that's a pretty optimistic picture of the future, and I certainly like that you don't think that robots are going to come in and start mind controlling us through uh, hormone bracelets or something, which is where my mind was going. So that's a very nice picture indeed.
Yeah,
It's
well,
really
I'm not familiar with robots. I'm too old. In my mind, the capacity of artificial intelligence is beyond my capacity. I'm um, a bit of a what would I say? I'm a bit naive when it comes to the capacity of artificial intelligence. I've certainly had my eyes and ears opened by the work that you guys are doing, and your use of artificial intelligence, and the way in which it's been able to collate the data that we collect through our pathology testing. And I'm very impressed with it. I just can't see a day when robots are controlling us. I think there are enough checks and balances in place that will negate that possibility. Not to say it can't happen, but it certainly won't happen in my lifetime.
oh, that is certainly optimistic. No, but I want to draw on that the capacity you're speaking about, the absolute wealth of experience. You've obviously got like virtually two of my lifetimes just in professional medical experience. So I want to stop looking so much at the future, but use the past as a reference stone. How have you seen health evolve over your 40 years in the industry? What did it look like back
So for
in
me,
what
it was
1980?
so in 1983 when I first started, certainly when I first started studying, um, we were very much around trial and error. We didn't have a lot of empirical data. We didn't have access to a lot of testing, and we certainly didn't have the capacity that we have now to use evidence to advise us on the best course of treatment or action for people. So that's been the single biggest change. We now have the technology, the advances in technology, the capacity to test, the ease of testing now. There are so many almost handheld devices now that can uh, give us some instant feedback on how we're going. I'll give you an example. There's a device that I use um, that does an immediate ECG for you, just sitting in your lounge chair at home. You put it on your knee, you attach it to an app on your phone, and you get an instant ECG. Now, I'm not suggesting we use that to determine whether we're having a heart attack or not, but it certainly allows you to look at whether you're in sinus rhythm, whether you're in abnormal rhythm, whether you've got atrial fibrillation or stuff going on. And these advances are just happening at a rate of knots. And this is unimaginable to me when I first started in the industry 40 years ago. I never believed we would have the capacity to do what we do now. I use, as part of my practice, an InBody 570 body composition machine. This machine is the equivalent of a DEXA machine that they use at the hospital. The DEXA machine uses radiation. My machine uses electricity, but it has a 2% variance between the multi-million dollar machine at the hospital and my $50,000 machine. And that's remarkable. I have that in my clinic, and I can give people an immediate feedback on their body composition, their visceral fat, the amount of water in their body, their protein levels, their muscular lean muscle mass, their visceral fat. There's so many measurements I can give people instantly. Now, again, for me to have got that data previously, I would have to get a referral from a GP to a specialist at the hospital to then go and be measured on a DEXA machine. And that whole process could take 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the region that you're in or the type of test that you're looking for. These things now happen far more expediently, and a lot of them can happen in practice, as it does in my practice. I can test people's hair follicles and get a 30-page report back within 15 minutes on what's happening with people at a cellular level. Um, these things just allow me to give so much better advice to someone who's sitting in front of me seeking answers to why they're feeling lethargic, why they're carrying too much weight, why they wake up tired, why they have poor sleep. I can provide so many answers from a nutritional perspective by looking and or using these great advances in technology that we now have available to us in situ in our practices. And that for me has been the greatest step forward. We can now use evidence and medically graded evidence. So, all the equipment that I use is all TGA approved, medically graded equipment. So, it's all verifiable data that we use that allows us to really give people immediate advice without having to go away and wait a week or wait or 2 weeks, where people can lose the motivation for change in that period of time and not come back. If we can start to give them, immediate feedback and immediate monitoring and immediate measurements around what's happening with them, it makes the journey so much more interesting, beneficial, and worthwhile for people, because they're getting constant reminders and or data points to assess how what we put in place is working for them.
Yeah, you spoke a bit there about having a hair follicle machine that you could put a client's hair in, and 15 minutes later, you've got a 30-page report in your hands. Given that that seems to be the direction in which things are flowing, the direction towards you can just give a small amount of like biological sample from yourself and then receive just a waterfall of data about what that means and what that tells you about yourself. To me, it seems like we're moving away from a time where we need a practitioner to view that data and interpret it for the client, just because of especially things like ChatGPT coming up and even Organelle's own ability to analyze health data automatically. It seems that there's going to be a lot less need for direct patient to practitioner communication, because the client will just be able to put their own hair in their own little machine, or maybe like a dollar coin at a Woolworths or something, put their hair in, they get their report. The report's written in layman's terms. They can understand what it means, what it might tell them about themselves. How do you see that going in the future? How do you see the practitioner's job evolving from someone who has to constantly
I,
interact with
I, I
clients on a
my
day-to-day
hope
basis?
my
Mm.
hope is that more and more people will have a very innate understanding of their own status of health and well-being, so that don't and won't rely on their GP as much for advice or intervention, which means that'll free the GP up to have much more meaningful uh, consultations with clients who might actually really need strong medical intervention. So I think that's one positive that will come out of it. I also think, though, as I alluded to earlier, people will demand much more. When they do go to visit a doctor or a specialist, they'll go armed with so much more information and then try and get a much better consultation with their GP or their specialist because of the fact that they are already formulating in their own mind, based on the information that they've received, um, some idea of what's going on with them. What they need then is to get some assistance and help in what they can do to either change what's going on with them or have some strategies to deal with what's going on with them. And I see that being the role of GPs, changing and improving over time, and that they provide a much more preventative and or um, um, optimistic outcomes for people by letting them understand that there are better ways of dealing with illness and situations going on with us health wise than just going down the path of medication. My absolute obsession in life is nutrition, and I use nutrition as my first form of medicine. As I've alluded to in earlier podcasts, I 100% believe that we are what we absorb, not what we eat. And for me, what I'm hoping that happens as we move forward is that people move away from the need to go and see a GP because they're concerned about their weight, or they're concerned about their skin breakouts, or they're concerned about their hair falling out, or they're concerned about the fact that they wake up with headaches and or aches and pains, when we can provide them with information as to why that might be happening in a nutritional sense. We can show them through their biomarkers or through their cell well-being tests just why they might be having some of those symptoms. So that rather than tie up a GP, they can start to make some changes around their day-to-day eating, drinking, and other lifestyle habits that may be contributing to what's causing them to feel unwell.
I see. How familiar are you with the increasing variety and capability of like the medical wearables? Because I think you have an Apple Watch. That's probably the entry level example to it. Then there are things like Whoop bands or Aura rings. These very small devices that kind of replace clothing articles, but just collect data on your health all day long. And the things they can do these days are kind of terrifying. My girlfriend has an Apple Watch, and I just learned that in a very recent update, not only are they tracking certain other biological metrics, but they've added a metric for stress to the Apple Watch, which I really liked. And the
Mm.
way it measures your stress is by it looks at your heart rate and it looks at your current activity level, so how much you're moving. If you've got a really high heart rate but you're not moving much, it says this isn't exercise for loose stress. This is just some kind of physiological or psychological stress.
Mm.
I thought that's really interesting. If you could create that kind of device, or rather, let me rephrase that question. What do you think the next evolution in those devices is going to be? Because for me, I was thinking about this in the shower, it kind of scared me, is where my comment from earlier came from. I was thinking that the next step these devices are going to take is they're going to go from, well, in the last episode, we defined that the three kind of levels of health are understanding what health is, learning how to measure it, and then learning how to affect it. I think the next step for these kind of devices is going from that measurement stage to the effect stage, where maybe it can do something to give you, I don't know, a little shock to stimulate blood flow, or even have some kind of injectable that could instantly regulate certain levels in your blood. What do you think about that?
Look, that is a distinct possibility, and I know for a fact that there are people out there working on these types of interventions now. I think it's inevitable that that's exactly where we would get to. I think it's inevitable that most testing in a medical sense will come down to handheld devices and or devices that we wear for a period of time. I mean, they already exist to a large extent. There are things like recently or in the last 10 years, they've developed the bug. It's called a heart bug, and it's a device that you wear that's associated with an app, and you wear it 24/7. It picks up all of the electrical currents and neurotransmissions within the body. It downloads them every morning onto an app, and it gives you an absolute comprehensive report that is sent straight to your cardiologist or to your neurologist, and they are then able to provide immediate feedback with you, whether you should be presenting to the hospital, whether you should be looking at doing this or doing that. And I think, we're reaching a point now where medical interventions will be readily available to people because the data that they collect is so accurate. They can provide an immediate response through some sort of stimuli via a watch or an EpiPen or some other devices that they are certainly looking at and working on developing at the moment. And I think there's a distinct possibility that these will be the first line of defence as opposed to a visit to the GP. Um, Consistent with that is the fact that people, Xavier, are demanding these types of machines. Now, people want immediate interventions. People want to be able to have faith and trust in these devices that they are paying, a substantial amount of money for, and they want to have faith in the fact that they do provide the data that is one not only collatable but also referencing exactly what's going on with you as an individual. So I think they're inevitable. I think that within 20 years, every home will have defibrillators, ECG machines, um, things that monitor, we already see it with type 1 diabetes, the manner in which they can manage type 1 diabetes now through little AI devices is remarkable, and it's making life so much uh, more pleasurable for people that suffer from type 1 diabetes. And I think this is going to continue to increase across a broad spectrum of medical conditions, stress being one. I think there'll be a lot of things that will come on in the next 15 years to help people deal with stress and anxiety because it's becoming a far greater problem now than it's ever been. I think there will be things that allow people, to really get a very quick understanding of what nutrients they might need to pack into their bodies today because of certain underlying conditions or certain things that are coming up in their day. And it's an exciting journey ahead that we are on, and I think there will be no limit on the advancements that we make and no limit on the interventions that people will be able to have, but also understand that those interventions, if they aren't working, that the systems will be developed to say to people, look, this is not working, you need to present to a hospital or to a GP or to something as well. That's where I think, one of the greater advances will be that people will be able to do some preliminary tests on themselves, which will give them either the information that they need to just not panic or the information that they need to go, no, perhaps you need to prevent to a medical professional and get this looked at a bit closer.
That sounds like a good diagnosis of the future to me. Well,
No,
Lionel, thank you
it
for your
is.
time today, and for everyone listening, thank you as well. If anything we've said's captured your interest or you'd like to find out more about who we are and what Organelle is, you can go to organelle.com.au. That's ORGANELLE.com.au. Beautiful stuff, Lionel. Thank you for another terrific episode.
As always, Xavier, pleasure to be with you.
Here we go. Till the next one.